Hi, my name is Paige Babin, and I'm a fourth-year biological sciences and psychology student. This summer, I worked with Dr. Barkema in the Department of Production Animal Health on a project focused on investigating the herd-level prevalence of Neosporosis in Alberta dairy herds using bulk tank milk samples. What is bovine Neosporosis? Bovine Neosporosis is caused by the protozoal parasite Neospora caninum, and it affects dairy cattle worldwide. Bovine neosporosis is often a chronic infection that persists throughout the lifespan of an affected animal. It is spread through vertical transmission, so from mother to calf, or is shed in the oocyst in the feces of infected dogs. The main symptoms of bovine neosporosis are abortions in mid to late pregnancy, the birth of weak calves, or reproductive problems, which ultimately affects milk production in cows and leads to substantial economic losses for dairy producers. The objective of this study was to estimate the herd-level prevalence of Neospora caninum on Alberta dairy herds. To address the issue of neosporosis, the cattle health surveillance system has been established to collect information on the frequency and distribution of Neospora caninum and other major infectious diseases across Western Canada. The results from this project will help inform producers on the best biosecurity and management practices for their farms to help prevent future economic losses. For this study, bulk tank milk samples were collected at 4 different time points: December 2021 and April, July, and October 2022. Samples were collected from all 489 Alberta dairy farms and were retrieved from Alberta milk. Once samples were collected, they were stored at -20 degrees Celsius. Milk samples were tested using an indirect ELISA, which indicates the presence of antibodies against Neospora caninum. ELISA results were dichotomized as positive or negative based on manufacturers' recommended cutoff values, and herd-level prevalence of neosporosis was then calculated as the proportion of positive samples out of the total tested samples. From this, we can see Alberta Milk's classification of the spatial distributions of dairy farms across Alberta, with the northern farms being north of Lacombe, the central farms between Lacombe and Calgary, and the southern farms south of Calgary. From these results, there are a few trends to take note of. First, that the prevalence of positive samples at least one time point and all 4 times was significantly higher in the northern farms than the central and southern farms. Second, that the prevalence of positive samples in the winter sampling months of December and October was higher than the prevalence in the summer months of April and July. Current literature supports the idea that disease is harder to manage in the winter months. From this graph, it is seen that there was a higher proportion of samples that were positive at least one time point than all 4 times. Farms in northern Alberta had a higher prevalence compared to central and southern region farms. This may be explained by the fact that the north region has higher forest lands that leads to a higher possibility of enhanced contact between wild canids and farm animals, as these wild animals are important hosts in the Neospora caninum life cycle. Seasonal variation is likely due to changes in herd over the year, as lactation stage and milk production of positive animals will have an impact on bulk tank milk antibodies. Since these results are based on bulk tank milk samples, that means that the sample is an aggregate of milking cows at that point in time. There may be a possibility that cows that had initially been infected were dried off and not part of the milk sample at another time point. Also, if the total number of milking cows increased between time points, then the milk from positive cows would be diluted, and we may not accurately be testing the antibodies to the level to become positive. Overall, these results provide up-to-date information on the disease frequency that will guide further investigation of within-herd prevalence estimation and devising appropriate control strategies for bovine neosporosis in Alberta. Right now, general biosecurity protocols are in place, and it is recommended that restriction of wild animals may be implemented along with testing and potential culling of infected cows. Further research could also be conducted on the distribution of wild animals who may be carrying the disease and their interaction with herds, as well as current management practices of producers and if this impacts the spread within herds. Lastly, I want to thank the organizations that provided funding for this research, as well as my supervisor, Dr. Herman Barkema, and Dr. Wasim Shaukat, who allowed this research to happen. Thank you for listening.